Good morning, y'all. We are back with another edition of DNVR Rams Live. As always, I am your host, Justin Michael. I hope everybody had a very fun and safe Halloween. Officially November 1st. This is the time of year where your seasons get defined, and the Rams have an opportunity here to potentially, push for a Mountain West championship appearance, to compete. They haven't had a conference title since '02, so that would be a huge deal. I have never made the Mountain West title game since we went to that format as a league a little over a decade ago now. Big matchup for the Rams at Nevada this weekend. I'm going to play an interview with defensive back Dominic Morris later on in the show. He gave some insight into the success of the defense of late. I kind of talked about how it's a symbiotic relationship between the secondary and the defensive line. We're also going to play an interview with Bill Bess. He talks about the style shifts offensively, why it's more fun for the big boys in the trenches. He dives into Jacob Gardner and what makes him so special in this system. He's been one of the best centers in the country this year. PFF has him as the highest graded center in the entire country. He's been really important to CSU's success, so I wanted to kind of focus on that a little bit. Here at the beginning, we're going to get into some series history before we give out some more keys. We talked about that a little bit yesterday. I also gave some thoughts on the Hoops exhibition against Adams State. Room to grow for the Rams for sure. A lot of new pieces, and it looked like it. But I think there's some intriguing talent on that team as well. So if you missed it, make sure you go and check that out at some point. At the end, we'll get into Mountain West power rankings, all that fun stuff. This is the 20th all-time meeting between CSU and Nevada. The Rams lead the series 14-5 all time. Sonny Lubick went 7-1 against Nevada during his tenure. Jay Norvell, the only coach to coach on both sides, he's currently 4-1, looking to go 5-1. Really, really interesting that in the 20 all-time meetings, Sonny Lubick coached in 40% of them. Jay Norvell will have been on the sidelines for one of the schools in 30% of the matchups all time. So a lot of these games have been, in the last 30, 40 years. Which is cool because I can talk about a lot of them. But the first matchup goes back to 1974. That was a 66-17 CSU win. On that day, Mark Driscoll actually set the CSU school record for touchdown passes in a single game with 6. Bunch of dudes have thrown 5 over the years. Nobody has been able to throw 6 since then. Stood, for 50 years, which is pretty impressive. 3 of those touchdowns went to Willie Miller. He was the program's first ever 1,000-yard receiver in 1974. He had a 163-yard day against the Wolfpack that day. Kind of interesting that, 2 of the most prolific athletes from CSU in the 70s played a big role in that matchup against Nevada. The Rams went 4-6-1 that year, so not a super successful season, but they did beat Florida State on the road, as well as that 66-17 win over Nevada. They beat Wyoming that season as well. After that 74 game, they did not meet again until 1997. That was a 45-13 CSU win. The Rams won the first 8 games between the two sides. I think the first 6 or 7 were by double digits. Sonny especially kind of beat up on Nevada in the late 90s, early 2000s there. Some of the more recent games that have been kind of significant in the history, obviously 2022, that first trip to Reno with Jay Norvell, very hostile against Ken Wilson. You had some pre-game theatrics. The 2017 game was a lot of fun as well. That was a shootout. The only loss that Jay Norvell has actually in this series. Bobo win, kind of the last hurrah before the wheels fell off. And then obviously, Air Force, Boise State, Wyoming, we don't need to go down those memories. I always kind of think back to 2009, 2010. Nevada was a lot of fun to watch back then. That was right before they joined the Mountain West, actually. And you had Boise State pretty consistently in the top 10, dominating the WAC. But Nevada, had that rise with Colin Kaepernick. If you remember back in 2010, they went like 13-1, really, really solid outside of a loss at Hawaii. Probably would have had a chance to potentially compete for a natty. I doubt they would have got in because of strength of schedule, but they drubbed the Rams 51-10. I think at one point they won like 19 of 20 games between those 2 years. But in 2009, they came to Hughes Stadium and they actually lost to CSU 35-20. One of my favorite memories in the stands with my little brother, my dad, my mom. Really fun day, early September, just a gorgeous day. I went to CB and Potts afterwards, all the good vibes, all the good memories. They've had some competitive games, I would say, over the last decade. Have been a lot more so, than in the 90s. And then, I mean, even when, Norvell was at Nevada, they killed CSU. I think his average margin of victory was like 38 points over the Rams or something like that. Really, really insane. Since coming over, Jay Norvell has obviously won both matchups against Nevada, looking to go 3-0. Would be very validating on his end. Would be kind of cool to see CSU reach bowl eligibility in his old stomping grounds. I'm not sure Nevada fans would feel the same way about that. But this is a big opportunity for CSU, opportunity to keep your Mountain West Championship hopes alive, opportunity to clinch your first bowl bid since 2017. And, frankly, I think it just takes some of the pressure off of the border war. If you're able to win this one, you get this in your back pocket. You don't have to have that also lingering over the rivalry game, which obviously has its own context. You only have one win over the Pokes, going back to 2015. This is a very beatable Wyoming team. But I very similarly to like what we said about the Springs, if you lost that game, then all of a sudden it just put so much pressure going into the Nevada and the New Mexico games. It would just be really nice to be able to check that box, get it out of the way, and then you focus on winning another trophy game. I'm going to play an interview here with offensive line coach Bill Best. We'll then preview the matchup a little bit more in depth. We talked about it a little bit yesterday, but here's offensive line coach Bill Best on the return to Reno. Obviously, he coached at Nevada with Norvell before coming over. The context of all that, what makes Jacob Gardner such a solid fit in this offense, and why it's fun to run the football. And I know it's been a couple of years, and they got a completely different staff. A lot of players have changed, but what's it going to be like going back to Reno again?
Just another football game to me, man. It's just another chance to compete. I mean, we loved our time there.
Oh, might have some technical issues there. See if we can get back to it in just a second. Why don't we do an ad break real quick, and then we'll try and get back to that interview if possible. Trucks have always been a part of Toyota's DNA for generations. Toyota has built durable legends destined for greatness and perfect for Colorado. Whether you're conquering off-road trails or hauling the weight of the world, there's a Toyota truck that's just right for you. I like the all-new 2024 Tacoma and the iconic 24 Land Cruiser. Toyota is perfect because you can cruise the city. You can also, trying to type and reach out here. But you can also get all of the dependability out on the trails, which is awesome. There's 17 models with available all-wheel drive or four-wheel drive. I like the Epic 4Runner. They also offer more low and zero-emission vehicles combined than any other automaker to give customers numerous choices to reduce their carbon footprint. There's 16 hybrid vehicles to choose from, like the Tundra iForce Max hybrid truck. Not to be outdone, Toyota SUVs take command on the road and on the trail, so you can explore the road less traveled without sacrificing smooth city rides in SUVs like the RAV4 and Grand Highlander. Toyota is a proud partner of CSU Athletics and the official vehicle of DNVR. I also want to talk to you guys about UC Health and their awesome initiative. I know it's been a couple initiative. UC Health wants to help you and other Coloradans be your healthiest selves by joining the Ready, Set, Co challenge. One of the pillars in this year's challenge is sleep. When you get 8 hours of sleep, you're rested, you're prepared, you're good to go. Do not sleep on sleep. Again, guys, you want to join this challenge. 8 is that magic number. When you get it, you're just going to put yourself in a much better position to thrive. If you want to join UC Health's Ready, Set, Co challenge, click the link in the show notes or go to www.uchealth.org/readysetco. We're going to try and play this interview, I think. If not, we'll move on. But here is offensive line coach Bill Best. staff, a lot of players have changed, but what's it going to be like going back to Reno again?
Just another football game to me, man. It's just another chance to compete. I mean, we loved our time there, had some good memories, but I mean, the coaching world it is what it is. You know, we're excited to go compete, though.
They've been in a lot of tight games. What stands out about them this season?
Well, I know their head coach, Coach Choate, I don't personally know him, but I know he's a defensive-minded coach, and just the effort and enthusiasm they play with on defense. They fly around, and you know maybe that's been missing a little bit the last couple of years, but they're definitely.
All right, we're having some technical issues. That's probably my bad there, so my apologies. I'll get that video out to you guys on Twitter at some point. You know, live TV, always fun. Hopefully, we're able to play the Dominic Morris interview later on, but we'll see. Not an encouraging sign. That's my bad, though. We'll get that out to you guys on social media. Let's just get into the CSU-Nevada game. Let's get back on track here. I want to kind of talk about some of the keys on both sides of the ball. The Rams have topped 150 rushing yards in 5 straight games, 6 total this season. That's the longest stretch since 2017. They had 8 straight and 10 total that year. Although, if you remember back, weirdly got shut down in the bowl game, and in the loss to Marshall, the offense as a whole was just rough that day down in ABQ. The one and only bowl experience that I've gotten to be a part of from the media side. It's been a long stretch here, and that's why, you know, winning this game would be so big. You know, I understand that Nevada, you know, much like some of the other teams that CSU has beaten this year, not exactly considered world beaters. That said, they've been highly competitive in every matchup that they've played. They've been a tough out for just about everyone. Last week, you know, the penalties and injuries kind of started to add up for them, and I felt like that played a major factor in what's already kind of a difficult road setting on the island. But I think running the ball is going to be a big factor. We didn't get to listen to it there, but Bill Best kind of talked about that a little bit, just why it's been big to have a physical identity. They've really embraced that this year, and Avery Morrow in particular has been a major part of that. He needs 289 yards for a 1,000-yard season. You know, I've talked about that a lot outside of, I think it was Chris Woke in 2011. Every time the Rams have had a 1,000-yard rusher since the beginning of the Sonny Lubick era, they have at least gone 500, qualified for the postseason. Avery Morrow right now, averaging 6.3 yards per carry. If he were to maintain that, he would finish in the top 10 all-time for single-season rushing average. Right now, he has 9 100 rushing yard games in his career. If he got to 10, that would put him at 7th most all time. Could move into the top 5 with 4 more to close the season. He really has been a major part of, you know, what has allowed the Rams to be competitive and be in this position. And very quietly, you know, has kind of played his way into that conversation with some of the best running backs in program history. Now, you know, he's not going to have the numbers that Steve Bartolo had. I think he had 28 100-yard games or something like that. Nobody's ever going to break that record, by the way. You know, he's not Capri Bibbs. He's not, you know, probably even Dalen Dawkins. But statistically speaking, he's kind of put himself in that Gartrell Johnson, Kyle Bell type range from his production. And hey, both those guys are looked back on pretty fondly, and both those guys played a pretty major role in a lot of wins there during their respective times. CSU is going to need Avery Morrow to have a big one. He had a little bit of a quieter game this past weekend. It was more of a Justin Marshall matchup. Ideally, you get both of those guys rolling, and, you know, maybe you can even pull off like a 2016 New Mexico, have 3 different guys push for 100 yards in this one. But Avery, going back against his old school, he was so big in that return to Reno, which, I've talked to some of the guys on the team. That was a pretty hostile experience for those players in that setting. I'm sure there'll be plenty of vulgarities, thrown their way from the stands. But they really need to be able to lean on him and be able to dictate the tempo, just limit the amount of time that your defense is on the field. When you do that, it's just such an assist to them. And obviously they're playing pretty dang good themselves. We'll get to that here in just a second. 6 of Braden Fowler-Nicolosi's 8 passing touchdowns have come over the last month. It was obviously a very quiet start, and part of that I think had to do with injuries out wide. Part of that had to do with the system change and him kind of needing, some time to adjust, which is to be expected. But he's figured it out of late. They've cut back on the turnovers, only 1 over the last month, 2 straight games without a pick, knock on wood. I'd like to see them hit just a little bit more consistently on some of these explosive passing plays. If you remember back to yesterday when we had the Matt Mummy interview, he mentioned that CSU is hoping to average closer to about 32 points a game. Haven't really been able to do that this season. A couple of moments, you put 30 on the board in back-to-back games there against San Jose State and Oregon State, but they've hit on about 2 explosive passing plays per game, like really one. I mean, you'll have probably more like 3 or 4 if you're going by the literal definition, which I think is more than 15 yards. But I'm talking about like the Caleb Goody, 68-yard touchdowns, the Armani Winfield play, stuff like that. They're hitting about 1 to 2 a game. You could double that if you could get it up to 4. I think that would just really put the defense, on their heels, because they already have to deal with an offensive line that is really playing well. They're establishing a lot of traction in the trenches. They're running the ball with consistency, and they've got multiple guys that they can burn you with there. But CSU does have a ton of speed out wide, and they've got a quarterback with a big arm. So being able to hit on some of those opportunities where you stretch the field vertically, I think that's kind of the big key for CSU if they're going to actually, play a real factor in this Mountain West Championship race. They're right there. I mean, they are a factor in the race as of now. But if they really want to be, taken seriously as a contender in this conference, I think they do have to be just a little bit more lethal offensively. Because when you look at what Boise State and UNLV, and obviously that's a tough comp, but those are the teams you're trying to square off with. Those teams, they have that physical identity. They run the football well. They also create a ton of explosives, and that's kind of the next step, I think, for this CSU offense, while also continuing to limit turnovers. And that's a tough balance to strike. I'm not going to lie. It's a tough balance to strike, especially from a QB standpoint, when you're not necessarily always in rhythm. It's tough when you got to make a big throw on 3rd and 9 across the field when you've run the ball, 7 or 8 straight carries. I mean, it is a tough spot that Braden is in. I think he's done a good job of adjusting on the fly to a different style of football. And if he embraces it and chooses to, stick around, I think this is an offense that would benefit him and his next level potential, because these are a lot of concepts you're going to have to be able to run in the NFL. But it's going to be interesting to me to see what happens with the offense over the next couple of weeks. It's also interesting to see what happens with this defense, because after a rough start, albeit against some pretty dang good offenses. I mean, you look at the talent that CU and Texas have, obviously, and even Oregon State before they got banged up. Those were some difficult matchups against some pretty good athletes. And, CSU gave up a bunch of rushing touchdowns in the Oregon State and Texas games, 8, I think, between those 2 games. They've given up 2 total for the rest of the season, though. And lately, I think the secondary has been better. The coverage has been more consistent. DBs have been really physical, which I love. Not necessarily perfect. There are times where they've been exposed a little bit, gotten called even for some pass interferences in conference play. But they're doing a really good job of limiting the big play. I wrote about this in a piece this week, and if you're not a DNVR diehard, now's a great time to take advantage of our promo, only $4 a month. Get access to all our written content over at DNVR. But one of the things I highlighted is CSU's ability to get off the field. They are giving up some chunk plays here and there, but it's proven to be empty calories. They've only given up 4 red zone trips in this 3-game winning streak. What's more, they're getting some stops and they're holding teams to field goals. If you remember about a month ago, I highlighted the fact that over the first 4 games, I believe it was, CSU was basically giving up a touchdown 100% of the time when opponents got into the red zone. Over the last 4, giving up 2 field goal attempts, you forced a turnover. That's a major step in the right direction. You're not giving up a ton of red zone opportunities, which is big. The more opportunities you give, and I think Nevada is a good example of this. Opponents have 36 trips to the red zone on them. That's twice as many as CSU this year. But we're starting to see the Rams find ways to get off the field, and when teams are managing to get into that plus territory, we're seeing the defense step up and make plays and at the very least limit the damage and hold them to field goal attempts. If they can continue to do that, they're going to be right there in the mix. They forced a lot more turnovers, which has also been big. 10 of the 13 turnovers they forced this year have been over the last 4 games. That's been a major factor, as has the ability to get off the field on third down. Struggled a little bit against Oregon State. I think Oregon State was about 50% in that game. Over the last 3 weeks, though, getting off the field 68% of the time on third down. That is really key for this unit. And I think part of that has been better coverage. I think part of that has been the ability to rush the passer with more consistency. They're getting home a lot more. They're winning at the line of scrimmage, though, which is a major factor and was something that, frankly, was kind of a question mark, I think, for this defense coming into the year without Mo Camara. And then, newer Gatkuth being injured, that was a major factor as well. We're seeing a lot of young guys step up, and I've got to get a lot of love to the vets in the interior. Cam Baratow, James Mitchell, those dudes just eat double teams, and it's the work that they're doing in the middle in the interior there that's really allowing CSU to have a lot of success, allowing the edge guys to get home, just allowing CSU to get off the field with more consistency. It's not always the flashiest approach, but they're playing meat and potatoes football right now, and they're doing it with consistency. It's a sustainable way to compete, which is, frankly, the only thing that really matters in the end. Like, are you winning games? You don't need a ton of style points. It would be fun to get a few here or there. Like, would it be nice to see CSU step on someone's throat finally? Because I think there's been multiple opportunities there where you could have won by double digits and instead let them hang around. If you continue to do that, it's going to bite you in the butt. There's no doubt about it. But it's been encouraging, and it's definitely going in the right direction. And if you can get a win here on the road, that's just another major milestone that you're able to accomplish. And hopefully you're able to follow that up, with a win over Wyoming. And now all of a sudden that trip to Fresno, more or less, could decide who's going to be in the running for the Mountain West Championship game. So there's a lot to consider. We're going to try and play this Dominic Morris interview. Furman transfer has been really solid at the nickel this year. 33 total tackles, 6 PBU, 1 forced fumble. We're just going to try because it is a solid interview, and I would like to be able to get his perspective. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work, and we'll move on, get into the power rankings and all that. But fingers crossed, here is Dominic Morris talking about the success CSU is having on third down, the symbiotic relationship with the defensive line, and what's kind of being emphasized going into this matchup with Nevada. All right, never mind. I don't think we're going to be able to get it. That sucks. I'm going to shout out Coors Light.
You guys have really been good on third down since the start of league play. I think opponents are only converting about 32% of the time. What's been the biggest key to the success you guys are having defensively?
I would just say leaning on each other. We have a big thing about post-50 communication. where it's where we rely on each other to communicate and make sure everybody's on the same page in those critical plays and critical downs and possessions. Those third downs are really where we got to key in and talk through it. And we've really emphasized that in practice, and I think that post-50 communication is really the key to why we're so successful on third down.
You guys gave up like 450 yards, but New Mexico, they only got to the red zone twice. They only scored once. I think you guys have only allowed 4 total red zone trips over the last 3 weeks. What are you guys doing well there to get off the field?
Well, we just take priority and pride, really, and once they cross that 50, not letting them get another inch. It's a really big deal to us, and we always just say, make them snap another play, because offenses are bound to mess up. They're really built to have one play miracles, one play home runs, and the more we make them line up and snap it, the more likely we are to keep them out of that red zone, because it's just not sustainable.
Losing Mo Camara, Newer being limited by injuries, there were probably bound to be some growing pains along the way. But the D-line, they got 5 sacks the last 2 weeks. I think 18 QB hits over the last 3. What are you seeing from those guys in the trenches, and how big has that been for you guys in the back end?
Well, we are like a symbiotic relationship, so when they're doing good, we're doing great. So it's just been really good to see those guys grow, see young guys step up and make plays, and new guys like Gabe Kursky and Kenyon Akers and them just come in and make plays when we need them. Kenny McDowell just come in and get that spark play and just making our jobs easier. So I'm just grateful for them and just so happy to see the boys growing and becoming more mature and more confident in themselves when they play.
Jay Norvell had a lot of praise for your guys' coverage efforts in that New Mexico game. You guys obviously forced 4 turnovers. How much is those D linemen getting home more frequently kind of leading to those more game-changing type plays?
Yeah, like I said, it's a symbiotic relationship. So we are, when they're doing good, we're doing great. And they cause those plays for us. So it's like a back and forth thing. Like sometimes we'll have what we call coverage sack. So we're playing good coverage and that leads to them getting a sack. Sometimes their pressures and hurries allow balls to be underthrown, tipped, wobble, whatnot, and that makes it just so much easier on the back end. So it's a full team effort, and that's what we're growing towards, and just getting better at every day, every week, really. Just being a cohesive unit and building and playing off of each other. So,
what's kind of the next step for this defense? Like, where are you guys trying to grow?
The next step for this defense is just making sure we are consistent every week, treating every opponent as our. We're not looking too far ahead. We're just focused on our next opponent, and we're treating every game as our most important game, and we're upholding our standard on defense. It's not really about anybody else. Our standard and our next step is making sure that we are the most sound, most consistent defense in those key moments, and making sure that we can find a way to win the ball game. So, and get our offense the ball back, because that's the name of the game, is to get pigs, lay licks, and make plays. So that's our goal.
What was your guys' reaction to that Dom Jones hit over the weekend?
Man, I know me personally, I had to go dap him up. I said, I didn't know you had that in you. I said I didn't know you had that in him. So I had to let him know that I was proud of him, because I really didn't know he was capable of that. But I'm just glad to see, because our coach was demanding a little more physicality from him, and I think he showed him he was physical there. So
you guys did a really good job of keeping Dampier in the pocket, limiting his damage as a runner. They're a little different stylistically, but Brendan Lewis kind of does some similar things. Just what are you guys emphasizing with this Nevada matchup?
Just making sure that we get our eyes back to our guys when those plays get extended, whenever he does find a way out of the pocket. Making sure we're disciplined in our man coverage, and not trying to be too greedy, like looking back at the ball whenever he's scrambling about, because he's not looking to throw it to us, obviously. So we're just trying to make sure that we are just consistently looking and making sure that we are diligent with our coverage, and making sure that we're winning at the line consistently, making it tough on those guys. So, yes, sir.
Obviously, like one game at a time, one thing at hand, but you guys are in the mix for Mountain West Championship, one win away from the postseason. What would that mean to you to get a bowl bid? I mean, this is a program that that's been 8 years. It's been a long time.
Of course, it would mean a lot, but like I said, like whenever you asked earlier, we're focused on the next game. First and foremost. So we'll get to that when we get to that, and we'll have a little more to say as a group. I would say whenever we get to that, obviously it would be great, but like I said, we want to focus on these on the next game, next foot in front of the other. So Nevada is the main focus right now.
Do you feel like, I mean, is that kind of what you're noticing around the locker room as a whole? Guys are, I mean, excited. Obviously, you've won 3 straight, but really keeping locked in and not getting too, feeling yourself a little too soon, I guess.
Yeah, I would say I think the older guys have done a good job of keeping everybody grounded, making sure everybody's focused on what we need to be focused on and not looking too far ahead because, a lot of things can happen in a couple games and a lot of implications can change within a couple games. So we just want to make sure that we are setting ourselves up for success the best that we can and taking advantage of the opportunity that we have.
Big shout out to Dominic Morris. Really insightful interview. I really enjoy talking with him. He's always one of the best interviews on the team, and he's been really solid for CSU in the nickel. Not the biggest guy in the world, but he's aggressive. 33 total tackles this year. I got 6 PBU, I believe. So he has been really, really solid. Yeah, 6 pass breakups and a forced fumble this season. Been a major part of the success in that secondary. Solid open field tackler. Solid in coverage, and he's a guy that you can move around, which has been really big. I also want to shout out Yaya behind the scenes, my producer, making all of this happen. It's not always easy, able to battle through some technical difficulties, get that great interview up. Big love to him. Show him some love in the comment section. Give us thumbs up on YouTube if you're listening. Real quick, before we get into the Mountain West Power Rankings, do want to shout out the homies over at Coors Light. Guys, life is chaotic. It can get stressful. I've got a long day ahead of me. I'm sure many of you do as well. It's all about how you respond during those times. If you're supposed to have a birthday party, a barbecue, something like that, you might get some bad weather. What are you going to do? You're going to hang your head. You're going to sulk. You're going to make the most of it. You're going to pivot inside, find a way to get it done. You want to just choose a chill mindset in your daily life. I know that's not always easy, but that's what I'm trying to do each and every day. Whether it's breathing exercises, little things each and every day. And then, when I'm kicked back, when I'm relaxing, might just crack open that ice cold Coors Light when the mountains turn blue. It's as cold as the Rockies. It's cold lagered, cold filtered, and cold packaged for that smooth finish. Make the most out of the times you choose to chill. Choose Coors Light. Get Coors Light delivered straight to your door with Instacart by going to CoorsLight.com/DNVR. Celebrate responsibly. Coors Brewing Company, Golden, Colorado. I also, and I've been craving Raisin Canes of late, but I got to talk to you about turbocharging, getting in there as fast as you can for those crispy chicken fingers. They're made fresh to order each and every time, so you're getting the best of the best. I love that Cane's sauce. The Texas toast is to die for. Ask for an extra piece. They'll do it. Make yourself a little sandwich there with the sauce and the chicken. That's what it's all about for cooked-to-order, hand-battered chicken fingers. Race into Raisin Canes. Turbocharge your chicken fingers. Get them even faster by ordering online at raisincanes.com or through the mobile app, Raisin Canes Chicken Finger. One love. Big shout out to everybody listening. I appreciate you guys. Battled through some technical difficulties today, but we were able to get it done. We were able to persevere. Hopefully the Rams are able to do so out on the road. That the Wolfpack are gonna come in this one with a chip on their shoulder. They're basically fighting to keep their season alive at this point. But I'm weirdly in a spot where I still have the lingering feeling of when is the other shoe going to fall. I've just experienced too much Ram life at this point. But I really do trust the veterans this year from what we've seen so far and the way that they're responding. I think the guys have the right mentality right now. I think they have kind of figured out on both sides of the ball what works for them. It's not perfect by any means. Still give up some explosive plays here defensively. I'm not creating enough explosive plays offensively. But as a whole, they have really turned a corner over this last month, and I think they're playing football that's complementary. And as Dom Morris said there, you got to have a symbiotic relationship. That's true between the defensive line and the secondary, but I mean that's true between the offense and the defense and the special team too. You need that cohesion. You need everybody to be clicking together feels like more or less that's what's happening with CSU right now. And no, they're not killing, top 25 teams or anything like that. But I don't think CSU goes 3-0 over the last 3 weeks very frequently in the last decade, especially against quarterbacks like Dampier, against, a hot San Jose State team. And obviously winning in the Springs is just not something that's happened almost ever for the Rams. So, they've had some milestones here. The next one is get to a bowl game. It's been far too long. You have an opportunity here to do it. And then we focus on the border war, which could have massive stakes. I mean, again, you're trying to keep an opportunity to compete for a conference championship alive. If you're curious, if Boise and CSU went out, if those two went out, they will play in the title game. That's the simplest scenario. If Boise and UNLV can potentially meet if they win out, but CSU loses a game, Boise and Fresno can play if they both win out and UNLV loses a game, because they do have the head-to-head against Fresno. If Boise loses, they're still likely in the title game if they only lose one, unless it's to San Diego State. Then things could get potentially wonky if San Diego State also ran the table. But San Diego State, they have to play both Boise and UNLV, so it seems unlikely that they are going to be able to win both of those. But there is a possibility, I believe, of a CSU-San Diego State title game, depending on how all the tiebreakers could work out. Boise, though, with that win over UNLV, and looking at their remaining schedule, very unlikely that they will not be in the title game. You're open for an opportunity to take them down if you're CSU. You got your first ever win over them last season. Very fortunate to avoid them in the regular season this year. UNLV as well. I mean, that's a quirk that stems from the Pac-12 scheduling alliance. They had to move some stuff around. That's the only reason CSU is playing Nevada in the first place. They lost a game against San Diego State and got that Nevada game. I think they swapped Boise for Fresno, which is, a tough trip, but certainly one you would take this year, given the circumstances and given, those two teams. Let's get into our Mountain West power rankings, and we'll do some picks. We'll get on out of here. I'll be going live post-game Saturday night, probably sometime between 9:30 and 10, depending on when that game wraps up, and make sure you're tuned into that as well. We'll start at the bottom, work our way to the top. You know the deal. At the very, very bottom, we've got Air Force coming in at number 12, 1-6 on the year, 0-4. They have got a tough matchup coming up with Army. We'll talk about that here in just a couple of seconds when we do the picks. Crazy to say, Wyoming at 11. I mean, those two have been very much consistent over the last decade. They're at the basement this year, though. Got them at 1-7, 1-3 in the league, coming off of a heartbreaking loss to Utah State, who comes in just ahead. To me, that's the bottom tier there. Utah State, Wyoming, and Air Force. You get to play two of them over the last month to close your season. You've got to take advantage of this schedule if you are the Rams. We've talked about it since the beginning of the season. We knew this was going to be the case. You opened with a pretty tough stretch, have a pretty favorable stretch to close out. You got to strike while the iron is hot. You got to capitalize while some of these teams that frankly have had your number. I mean, we think about Air Force and Wyoming. Obviously, you've only beat Wyoming once since 2015. You just picked up your first win over Air Force as well. But I mean, think back to Utah State the last couple of years and some of the frustrating losses that the Rams have had to them, and obviously the Adazio special teams debacle in 2021 was kind of the peak of the frustration. And people forget that was kind of after the fans had started to buy in too. Funny enough. I mean, that was the last 2-game stretch in which the Rams did not have a turnover, was that 2021 stretch where they beat San Jose State and New Mexico at the beginning of conference play, coming off of what was a frisky showing against Iowa. You were right there. And then just lose all of the goodwill with one of the dumbest losses that CSU's ever had. And then even, the last couple years off of that, like you lose a tight game at home for homecoming and what would that be? 2020, God, the years are blending together. 2023 or 2022, excuse me, at home, the Giles Pooler game. If you have your starting quarterback, you probably win that one. Last year you go up 21-0 and or 17-0, whatever it was, and you still lose by double digits. I mean, that they're kind of a team that you owe some payback to as well. If you're the Rams, you're not going to apologize that they're struggling this year. You just need to capitalize and find a way to beat these teams that, frankly, for the better part of the decade have really kind of owned you there. Number 9, Nevada. Injuries starting to add up, coming off of probably their worst showing of the season at Hawaii. They're 3-6 on the year. They're 0-3 in league play. All tough losses for the most part this season. But I do wonder if the lack of depth is going to kind of catch up to them here in the end. I got to credit Jeff Choate because, frankly, I thought they were going to be the worst team in the league. And I mean, they're significantly more competitive than Wyoming, who returned double-digit starters on both sides of the ball. So big credit to them. Going to be a really tough test this weekend. Number 8, they just got the head-to-head. So they very narrowly come in over Nevada, although I think if they played 10 times, Nevada would probably win more often, just being real. But Hawaii 3-5, 1-2 on the year. Maybe starting to figure it out a little bit. We'll see. I'm desperately rooting for Timmy Chang to have some success. Much like CSU, it's an offense that I thought would be more consistent given the returning talent that they had around the field. But they've played a tough schedule. New Mexico coming in at 7. I just give them the narrow edge due to Devin Dampier, basically 3-5 overall, 2-2 in the league. San Diego State at 6. I think this is another tier here. If Air Force, Wyoming, Utah State's a tier, Nevada, Hawaii, New Mexico, San Diego State's probably a tier. San Diego State, I would say, is probably the most complete team of the bunch. O'Neal, their freshman quarterback, kind of intriguing. They're playing more competitive now. They're a team to keep an eye on, down the stretch. But again, they do have to play Boise and UNLV, which is it's a tough draw. San Jose State trending the wrong direction at the moment. I still think they'll make a bowl. But 5-3, they're 3-2 in the league. They've lost to arguably the only 2 decent teams that they've played. They've beat up on some bad teams, which, hey, much like CSU, you're not going to apologize. But we're just kind of starting to see it, the schedule play out. They opened with a very favorable schedule. They took advantage of it. They closed with a little bit tougher, kind of the opposite of CSU in that regard. I did drop CSU from 3 to 4, despite the win over New Mexico. I had Fresno jump them with their win over San Jose State. I just thought more or less you're basically even, but Fresno had a slightly more convincing performance this past week against a team that we have higher in the power rankings. CSU 5-3, Fresno 5-3. They're 3-1 in the league. We're 3-0. Their loss was to UNLV. They got their asses kicked, but I'm not gonna kill them over a loss to UNLV, who's been awesome. And obviously they're at the top there with UNLV at 6-2, 2-1, and then Boise reigning supreme as they tend to do, 6-1 on the year, 3-0 in the league. I'd put the top 2 in their own tier. I'd put 3 through 5 in their own tier. 6 through 9, and then 10 through 12. That's kind of how I would box these teams together. I think especially that second tier, they're capable of punching up, should more or less be able to take care of business against anybody in those lower tiers. But I do think there is a gap there between Boise and UNLV and everybody else. But hey, that's why you play the games. You're just hoping for an opportunity. Great comment here from regular Dad Bod. He says, I'm fully bought in on the offensive theory this year. Controlling the game is a huge advantage in this boom or bust league. I mean, one of the things that I've talked about really since the beginning of the season is it's challenging on your defense when you play an up-tempo air raid style offense, because you're going to have a lot of incompletions, which means you're going to have a lot of short possessions, which means your defense is going to be on the field a whole lot. We've seen at times, CSU have the flash, have the ability to put up the big stats, go for 500 total yards of offense. And then you look up and for whatever reason, you're not able to finish. I feel like the Rams are more sustainable with the way they've been able to compete this year. Again, it's not the sexiest brand of football, but neither were a lot of those Sonny Lubick teams. They weren't the flashiest brand in the world. It wasn't that flashy leaning on those O-lines and handing it to Kevin McDougal as they go through your face. It wasn't that flashy, with BVP running around in the backfield and Cecil the Diesel. This is a way that you can compete consistently in this league. And frankly, when you look at Boise State, they've had some quarterbacks over the years, not like NFL stars or anything like that, but they've had some good quarterbacks for sure. But when Boise's been best, what have they done? They've controlled in the trenches on both sides of the ball. They've run with consistency. They've forced turnovers. That's what the Rams are doing right now. This is a sustainable way to win in this league. And while I do want to see them hit on more explosives through the air, and they're emphasizing that because they need to score more points. They do need to score more points. Otherwise, by the time the third and fourth quarter rolls around, instead of leaning on that ground game and really burying teams, they're just going to put 8-9 in the box. They're going to dare you to throw. If you're not able to beat them, that's a tough spot to be in. They've been really close, back to back. They've tried to hit Jordan Ross on a couple. They've tried to hit, Winfield downfield. Caleb Goody's kind of become their most consistent guy down the field. He's missed on a couple of other ones that would have been big plays as well. You add 1 to 2 more of those per game. That's really all it takes. A couple of big throws on third down, and all of a sudden you go from a team that's scoring like 21 to 24 to like 32 to 36. And with what you're doing defensively, with the way you're running the ball, that's going to put you in a really good spot. You're going to win a lot of games, like especially in this conference. I'm not going to apologize for wins. I don't think it's perfect. I do think that they've got to be able to create some of those explosives because, as Dominic Morris talked about it there, it's hard to sustain consistently when you're trying to do, like 12 to 15 play drives, go all the way up and down the field each and every time. That's not an easy way to play. Just getting the ball in your speedy guy's hands in the open field and letting him do all the work, take it to the house 70 yards. That's an easier way to play. It's challenging to be able to get those plays in rhythm, though. And obviously, when you have those key opportunities, you've got to be able to strike. You can't miss open receivers. You can't have drops. Drops have been an issue for receivers this year. So I would like to see them open it up just a little bit. But I'm fully with you. I think leaning into this physical identity and with the depth and the talent that you have in this backfield, why would you not really lean into that with what you've been able to do so far? It would make no sense to go away from it. I'm interested to see what happens, especially down the stretch, as teams are really going to key in on the run game. If you're Nevada, that Avery Morrow and Justin Marshall are a big part of what CSU wants to do. And so that's where your quarterback has got to be able to make some big throws, when they're daring you to throw it, or when it's 3rd and 8 and you've got to be able to stay on the field. And CSU has the guys to do that. Can they do it with just a little bit more consistency? It's been better, I think, with each week, especially kind of going back to the CU game, which was a low point, I think, for the Rams offensively, albeit against a very good defense. Since then, they've started to figure it out, and it's been encouraging. Before we get out of here, if you have any questions, comments, thoughts, send them my way. Get them here in the Toyota chat. I'll answer them at the end. Not a great slate for the Mountain West this week. UNLV's on a bye, so you're losing one of your top 2 teams. We do have a game tonight, San Diego State at Boise State. Last I had checked, and these spreads are obviously always changing. Number 15, Boise State, 24.5-point favorites against San Diego State. It feels a little steep for a San Diego State team that has some talent defensively. It's flashed a little bit offensively. I just wonder if they're frisky for a little bit, but ultimately Gianti breaks like 3 big runs, and then that proves to be the difference in the end. I am going to take San Diego State to cover the 24.5 hesitantly, but I do think that Boise State wins this comfortably, likely even by 3 touchdowns. Army, 22-point favorites against Air Force this week. Crazy spread. You don't see spreads like that in the Service Academy matchups, but this is an Army offense that is electric, and frankly, it's an Air Force team that feels about DOA. So we're gonna go Army to cover that 22. I think they create some explosives through the air, and then they lean on that triple option, which is it's a handful. I think Calhoun needs a nice performance in this one. They need to at least compete. There's a lot of fans, I think, that are getting pretty restless because it's funny, for all the success that they've had in the league, they still haven't been able to break through and win a league title. They beat up, on CSU most years, but they haven't been great in the Service Academy games. The games that matter, it's starting to turn into kind of a Bobo situation where it's like, yeah, it's great that you went 7-5 all those years and made bowls, but you don't ever win the games that we really want to win. I'm just kind of interested to see what happens there. Wyoming going to Albuquerque, a place they've struggled historically. For all the success Craig Bull had against the better programs, he kind of struggled against New Mexico. The Lobos, 7.5-point favorites in this one. Man, they are daring you to take Wyoming. I just don't know if Wyoming can score enough to keep up with this New Mexico offense. I think Dampier does enough, and I think the Lobos cover that 7.5. Hawaii going to Fresno State. Fresno, 12.5-point favorites. The Warriors obviously much better at home. That's a tough spread. That's well set. I've been a Hawaii guy. I'll stay on brand. Give me Hawaii to hang around. I think they probably still lose by about 7-10, but I think they can cover the 12.5. Although I think it's either a really tight game or they get blown out. I don't think there's probably a lot of in between. That seems to be the case with Hawaii on the road. Finally, CSU, last I checked, 2-point favorites going into Reno. Give me the Rams. Give me the Rams to cover the 2. I think they win this one. I said last week that I thought that CSU wins that game against New Mexico by double digits. I thought it would be more like 50-35 or something like that, and not the 17-6 grinded out type game that we had. I think the Rams take care of business in this one. I don't have a feel for the type of matchup, although there's part of me that feels like the offense is kind of due to like put 40 on the board or something like that. I know that sounds crazy because there's not a lot we've seen to indicate that. It's really just a gut feeling, but I do like CSU to cover the 2. I think they win this one in a game that's competitive, but the Rams end up winning comfortably in the end. I think you see another big defensive performance. I think Avery Morrow balls out, but I'm hoping that we see Braden connect on a couple of big passing plays, and he has a big one in this matchup as well. Regular Dad Bud in the Toyota chat wants to know, if the Rams run the table and 9-3, what's the chance of a ranking? They could maybe squeeze in there at the end. I don't think they would be much higher than 25th or 24th, but I mean, 9 wins. The problem is people are going to use the strength of record against the Rams. They'll say like, who have you beat? And that's fair. What helps CSU is if they were 9-3 in that instance, 2 of their losses would be to top 25 teams, top 15 teams. If Texas keeps winning and the Buffs can keep on winning as well, I'd say every game they play down the stretch, they can win. I mean, they could. So I mean, if your only losses were to a 10-win CU team and a Texas team that's going to be in the playoff, that's a pretty strong argument, especially because your third loss was double overtime on the road against Oregon State. Their wheels have kind of fallen off. The injuries are starting to add up, unfortunately, which takes a little bit of the credibility away from that type of performance that you had against Oregon State. But yeah, I mean, I think if you were a 9-win team, you would probably crack the top 25 there at the end. Maybe not for very long, especially if you lost to Boise in the title game. If you won the title game, for sure you would be a top 25 team, because Boise's probably going to be flirting, with the top 12 if they keep winning, and they can get a little bit of help in front of them. Their only loss being at Oregon is obviously great for their resume, but also the resume of the entire league. I mean, Oregon's number 1 in the country, and Boise had them on the ropes, which is good for the respect and just for the way that the country looks at the league. I used to argue that a lot in hoops with teams like San Diego State and them being able to punch up. It's good for the league. Like, frankly, one, because we're going to the Pac-12 together, but also just we're trying to elevate our own brand. Like, CSU should be, if you're a CSU fan, you should be probably rooting for Boise to get a lot of attention here. You'd love for them to be as highly ranked as possible if you got an opportunity to play them in the title game, because that only helps your cause if you could slay them, if you could take them down. Gianti winning the Heisman would be good for the brand as well, especially as we rebuild this Pac-12. I mean, that's a big moment. That would be very validating for these programs and the way they're kind of viewed on a national level. Joey wants to know, Justin, what's your favorite thing to barbecue on the grill? I'll be honest, I'm still working my way up to the real tough stuff. I haven't done a ton of like real big challenges yet. Haven't gone for steak or something like that. I'm a big burger guy though, and honestly, at this point, I feel like I can make myself a better burger than I can get at most restaurants. So that's been kind of nice, to have that in the back pocket. I love brats and dogs, so you can't really go wrong. Joey also wants to know, Justin, will you be going to a bowl game if the Rams get invited? TBD. It would depend on where it was, honestly. I mean, if it's the Hawaii Bowl, probably not. I doubt that. I doubt that the bosses are going to send me to Honolulu on Christmas Eve. I don't think I don't think that'd be very economical. If it's like Albuquerque or Tucson or something like that, yeah, I would assume that I would be going. I guess I shouldn't say definitively. That's a month from now. You don't know what could happen. But I mean, I will say this: if the Rams are in a bowl game, I have every intention of being there, and I certainly would do everything within my power to make that happen. It's a major moment. It has not happened since 2017. I remember that New Mexico Bowl, like thinking, they had just announced the Bobo extension, and I was kind of just like, yeah, they closed the season kind of poorly, but I think 2018 is going to be our year. Obviously, that did not prove to be the case. As he says, Rams projected in the Potato Bowl versus Buffalo. I've seen them all over. I've seen them projected in Hawaii. I've seen them projected in Idaho. I've seen them projected in a couple of Texas Bowls, I think. I mean, if they won 8+ games, I would think that would be too many wins for like the Potato Bowl or the Hawaii Bowl. I guess I don't know definitively, but we'll see. We'll just see at this point. Just satisfy the bare minimum, get to that 6th win. We can worry about bowl projections when they are bowl eligible. I kind of felt like I jinxed it last year. I started talking about the bowl projections over those last couple of weeks, and then Hawaii was such a gut punch. So let's just take the old football cliche and take things one game at a time. That's all I've got for you guys. Like I said, I will be going live Saturday post game. Much love to all of you for tuning in. Much love to Yaya for running the sticks, making all of this possible. Always proud to be y'all. Peace.
We all silly like